the discoverable God. He has made himself known. He's made himself known through his creation. He's made himself known through his holy word. He made himself known through his Son as he walked upon this earth. Parable lane number 6, is the price too high? This is a question we're going to ask, but you know what? I can't answer that question. Only you can answer that question for yourself. Is the price too high? One point, that's all we need here after we read the highlight verse. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot what? Wow, harsh. Harsh. If you don't renounce all that you have. So one point, many will follow Jesus, but not become his disciple. Now, Janie said, followers of Christ, there's nothing wrong with being a follower of Christ, but there's a difference between someone who says, you know what, I dig that Jesus guy. Remember back in the 60s we said dig. I dig that Jesus guy. And the things I agree with, I'll follow him. That's different than being a disciple, and we're going to learn that here in a few minutes. And our only question we want to answer is this: are you willing to change from follower to disciple? Once again, I can't answer that question. I have to answer it for myself. And you know how often I have to answer it? Every day I wake up. Am I just a follower, or am I a disciple? Famous people travel with this beautiful pack of animals called the entourage. You know, friends, bodyguards, staff, chauffeur, other officials. And then there are other people, these hangers-on, the groupies, and of course the people who just want to what? Look good because of who they are with. Some folks leech off the famous, and some just like to be where the action and the fun is. Rock stars, political figures, and even religious personalities will not go anywhere without their entourage. These people that make them feel safe and important. Now, Jesus had more than the 12 following with him. Sometimes several wealthy women traveled with him and provided for his and the apostles' needs. Then there were those who he had healed of sickness, of demonic oppression. And there were others, you know what? They were just hanging around and following Jesus from town to town for one thing and one thing only, the show. They wanted to see a miracle or two. They wanted to see how he would tussle with the Pharisees and with the Sadducees and maybe even with the Roman government. That's why a lot of folks were there. Great crowds followed Jesus on this last journey to Jerusalem. Remember the feeding of the 5,000? That's a large group of folks, isn't it? And the feeding of the 3,000, you know, even today in our land of 330 million to 350 million, if you have 5,000 people show up unexpectedly at a location to hear somebody speak that had not been announced they were going to be there, WHIO will be there with drone and then news crews to film it and to report on it and decide what you ought to think about it. I mean, 5,000 folks is a large group of people. The presence of the crowds will prompt the parable. Jesus looks at these people and he tells them by parable the cost of being a true disciple and not just someone who follows along. He looks at them and he thinks, are you camp followers? Are you curious, looking for entertainment, or do you want to be a disciple? And as he speaks these words for the next few weeks, for the next few months, the crowds will thin and the flock will thin. And then as the sun rose on the day of Pentecost, there were 120 disciples kneeling in prayer. Father, thy will be done. From thousands of people down to 120. Who were the disciples? Now great crowds accompanied him, and he turned to them and said, Luke chapter 14, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, and wife and children, and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, cannot be my disciple. I don't think he said it that way, but I want to emphasize this idea of hate. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be what? My disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see him will begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, when going out to encounter another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate if he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he says a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So, therefore, if any of you does not renounce all that he has, he cannot be my disciple. Love God above all else. The words of Jesus seem harsh. Unless you hate your parents and your siblings and your kids and your own life, you cannot be my disciple. What does that mean? The day I became a Christian, and I go up to Mom and Dad and said, I hate you. I hate you with the blazing heat of 1,000 suns. Did I disobey the commandment to honor my father and my mother? Did I disobey Paul's word that says the man who does not take care of his family is worse off than an infidel? So something else is going on here, isn't there? There's a misunderstanding of this word hate. In Aramaic and in Hebrew and in all the Semitic languages, there is no word for like, except as a simile. There is no word for like. You know what? I love deviled eggs, but I hate eggs. That makes sense? Because deviled eggs what? Well, they're eggs. But they're eggs of what? A different form. But I like fried eggs, and I like scrambled eggs, and I like eggs in my cakes, and I have eggs in my, okay? So what does that mean? I love this, but hate that, but actually I like them both. I just prefer what? This is what God is saying. Unless you say, Father, I do love Mom and Dad, but I love you more. I love you so much that if I had to leave Mom and Dad, guess what I'd do? I'd leave them. And I know Christians who have done just that because Mom and Dad didn't accept them anymore. Genesis chapter 29, we have something really funny, strange, odd, because language differences going on here. Verse 29, so Jacob went in to Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. That's verse 30, rather. That's verse 30. Here's verse 31. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, whoa, where did that come from? He opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. See, this idea, he did love Leah, but he loved Rachel more. Now, I had one professor tell me, he says, this idea that Leah had weak eyes, not a good translation. The word could also mean delicately beautiful. So, Rachel was a knockout. Leah had pretty eyes. Okay? Does that make sense? Absolutely, I think. So when you read the word hate in the scripture, check the content. Not hate your parents and siblings, love them less than God. Bear your cross. What in the world does that mean? This is the longest part of the sermon. So if you need to get up, go to the bathroom, get a cup of coffee, okay? Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Every disciple disciple, without exception, takes up a crossbeam. You can't see it, but it's there. Sometimes you feel it, sometimes not. I feel mine especially during times of meditation and prayer. When I review my day at night, I could feel my crossbeam get heavy. Because, well, Bill, you flubbed this, you missed that opportunity, you didn't do this and didn't know that. And though you asked for strength not to be so sharp-tongued, let me count the ways. But then the load lightens because it's taken away. The sin is taken away. The condemned criminal did not carry a full cross as we see in art, just the beam that would be lifted up and dropped onto the stake. Now, you got to wrap your mind around this. Now, most criminals were just tied to a cross and they would hung up there to die of dehydration. It'd take 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And finally they'd give out and their lungs would crush their hearts. So you're tied to this cross that you're carrying. And then they take these 2 yoked sticks and they lift it up. And they drop you onto that stake. Now, what do they do to Jesus? They didn't tie him. They what? What happened when he got the impact of that drop? And then they nailed his feet. So every criminal carried a crossbeam. Every disciple carries a crossbeam. You can't see it, but it's there. You see, they carried it from prison to the place of death. We carry it from our first day of sin until we stand before the throne. Some days it's heavy. Others days it's ponderous. Ponderously heavy. The beam contains, I think, 3 things of differing measure depending on the disciple. There's the measure of daily sacrifice, Matthew 16:24. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and what? Follow me. For whoever who would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. There's the measure of persecution. This is also in our crossbeam, because the world does not know our Lord or his words. John 15:20. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute who? They'll persecute you. That's part of your cross beam. If they kept my word, they would keep yours also. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. And Paul says to Timothy, 2 Timothy 4, as for you, always be sober-minded, enduring suffering, to do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. And then when Paul, right before Paul's about to be baptized by Ananias says, I can't believe you're asking me to baptize this guy. Are you out of your mind? This guy hates us. He sent us off to prison. He's taken away our property. He separated men and women from their children. This is my chosen instrument. And I chill whenever I think of these words. I will show him how much he must suffer for me. So there's a modicum of suffering that's in our crossbeam. And for their many, there's the measure of denying their inborn and self-taught addictions. You know, some children, because of their moms, are born addicted to alcohol. Some are addicted to heroin. Some are addicted to cocaine. Some were addicted to tobacco at birth, okay? Because mom was smoking, and so was dad and anybody else who came to that apartment in Germany. So when a child is born with this addiction, they have to go through what? Okay. Now, So some are born addicted, but Jesus says, take up your cross, deny yourself, and follow me. Some later on in life choose these addictions, and I think of the sad case of Josh Gordon. Who's heard of Josh Gordon? Played wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns, and he loved his marijuana more than his job, making millions of dollars, and the NFL says you're out for a whole season. You've lost $12, $15 million this year because of that stuff. So he goes and he dries out, he gets off the stuff, and he comes back for a couple of games, and he gets what? He gets it again. And then he gets it again. And finally they said, 3 strikes, you're out. The guy gave up millions and millions and millions of dollars for what? For an addiction. Some are born with traits of kleptomania. Some people are just born plain mean, if you hadn't noticed. Some people are just born plain angry. Our daughter was. Sarah, if you watch this on YouTube, yes, I did say it. Some become antisocial by the way they are raised, and then they choose to stay in that state. These are part of the crossbeam, and Jesus says, deny yourself every day, and I will make your burden light. We might have to give up things. Who's heard of Shelley Pennyfeather? Shelley Pennyfeather. Oh, my goodness. Former Villanova University women's basketball star gave up her life of wealth to become a cloistered nun in 1994. The Poor Clares is what she joined. Now, she was the top scoring woman, and 4 years after she graduated in 1991, on the verge of a $200,000 annual salary, she answered her calling and renounced her worldly life as a cloistered. Now, what does that mean? Let me describe it for you. A cloistered nun who lives in a cloister. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Great. That's a person who lives in a convent that no one else is allowed in. No men allowed, no family allowed, no friends allowed. You cannot sleep more than 4 hours because every 4 hours they wake you up for 2 hours of prayer. And she chose that life. This became news this week because you are allowed family and friends to come by once every 25 years. Oh, no touching allowed on that 25th. But you can see them and you talk to them. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but some people will say, Lord, you are so precious to me, I will give up a husband, $200,000 a year, which at the time would have been the highest paid woman basketball player. I'm going to give up the possibility of children. I'm going to give up seeing my nieces and my nephews and my mom and my dad to pray and to serve. You got to count the cost. You know, Jesus says, for which of you desire to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, he's laid the foundation, not able to finish it. All who see it will begin to mock him, saying, this man started to put a new roof on his house and didn't figure out if he had money. What happens, by the way, if you get a roofing company and they come out and they strip all the stuff off and say, oh, excuse me, I'm out of money? What do they say? Call us when you get money. Could you put a tarp up there? You got money for it? No, I don't. We'll enjoy the rain. And the neighbors are going, didn't you know they would want money? That's what's going on there. You got to count the cost if you're going to start to do something. You know, the Greek language, from Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, from Homer to Paul, the word disciple had a distinct meaning. A disciple wasn't one who would just sit there and listen and absorb the teaching. They would sit and listen. They would absorb the teaching, learned and found application for life. Disciples learn for a lifetime. Therefore, one must tally the cost before they accept the call. Shame and ridicule follow the one who starts and does not finish a project. Now, I ran more races than I can count, but I've got every one of my race numbers and a couple of cool pictures if you want to see them. But there was one race I didn't finish because I was a bandit. Now, only one person in this room knows what a bandit is besides me. That's Jordan. A bandit is someone who runs a race but didn't pay the entry fee. So I ran the race with my friends who also didn't pay their entry fee. Well, we could not cross what? Couldn't get the T-shirt, couldn't get the medallion. Matter of fact, because I couldn't do that, I slowed down to the slowest 10-kilometer race of my life because what? What was I fighting for? It didn't mean anything. And people saw me pulling out, and my friends pulling out, they're like, what are these guys up to? Why do they quit? Because we weren't committed. Oh, why didn't we pay? They only allowed 3,000 people to run the race, and we didn't get our money in time. Okay. The root word for disciple means this. I don't know if you want to write this down or not. The root word of disciple means this. Mental effort needed to think something through and then to follow through. The mental effort needed to think something through, then to follow through. That's a disciple. And that's what Jesus said to the masses. And the flock thinned. Forsake the world. Pilgrim's Progress. If you've never taken the time to read it, I suggest you do. The Pilgrim's Progress, written by John Bunyan, talks about a man whose name is Christian. And he leaves the city of destruction. And his wife and his children plead, don't leave us, don't leave us, don't leave us. But he leaves this, I've got to go to the celestial city, to the eternal city. And he leaves his family and he goes on this terrible, horrible journey and he fights Apollyon. He gets captured by a giant and put into a prison, into a dungeon. And it's a long, long, long story. And then you get to it and he dies. And he crosses the River Jordan. And his friend helps him over to the celestial city. The end. No, that was part one of the story. Part two, his wife and his children are at his bedside. He never left them. He had been walking the Christian life while still being a married man by still having children. And when he died, they marveled at his Christian life. They said, we've got to have what he had. And Christiana follows her husband. And that's the second part of the story. It's worth your read. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Christian did renounce all that the world had, but he still stayed a disciple of Jesus. And he still stayed a disciple of Jesus, but he never left his wife and children. A disciple is someone who says, take the world, but give me Jesus. So you got to accept the treaty. Why do you need to know this? Have you stopped growing? Then examine your life as a disciple. Loving things more than your Lord, dropping your crossbeam will cause you to become saltless. Salt is good, but the salt has lost its taste. How shall its saltiness be restored? What do you need to do? What do you need to do? You know, if you decide to become a disciple and not merely a follower, then you must say goodbye to the world and all of its attachments. God offers a peace treaty. You've got to accept the peace treaty. You know, what king with 10,000 will march out against one with 20,000? He won't. He'll ask for conditions of peace. You are an army of one, and you're going to say, I stand against your armies, O God. No, I think you need to sue for peace. Accept his treaty. That's what you need to do. The condemned criminal did not carry the whole cross, just the beam that would be lifted up and dropped onto the stake. They carried it from the prison to the place of death. We carry it from our first day of sin until the day we stand before the throne. Some days it's heavy, and others days it's ponderous, much like the chain that Marley forged and carried. If you think of the Christmas carol, it's a ponderous chain. Some see Christianity as a weight too heavy to bear, too much sacrifice. I've seen with my own eyes, heard my own ears, people say the following. This is before I was a preacher. I was just a deacon in a church visiting. I can't give up this pleasure, that pleasure, this way of life. I've got to have that. This Christianity sounds like it's got a lot of promise to it, but I'll have to turn it down. I cannot and will not give up the pleasures of the world. God will have mercy yet because he is a God of love. Sacrifice, yes, there's sacrifice, but the sacrifice of things that destroy the soul, block fellowship with God, and separate us from a life that is real. Now, G.K. Chesterton writes this: Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and not tried. Ponder that. Where's your heart this morning? Where's your heart this morning? Are you going to say to the Lord, I like what you have to say, but I want to do the things that please me? Or are you going to say to the Lord, I love you with my whole heart, and I just cannot turn down this opportunity? The choice is not mine for you. The choice was mine for me. The choice is not you for me. It's you for who? Yourself. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Jesus of Nazareth, King of my heart.